Director Fraga, Director Higgins, Director Hobson, Director Pang,
Here.
Director Ross, Director Fuentes.
Here.
We have a quorum of 7 present, with Director Fuentes participating via phone. Although he is chair, due to his absence, the vice chair of Director Ross will oversee the meeting. Let the record also show that I'm out of breath and that Directors Anderson, Colson, DeWitt, Cotel, Lewis, McAllis, Melvin, Troiani, also by phone, and Chairman Dillard are also present.
Thank you. Item 2 is approval of the minutes from the meeting held on January 18th. Are there any questions or comments? If not, is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted? Motion by Director Pang, seconded by Director Durante. Any discussion? Do we need a roll call probably? Roll call, please.
Director Durante?
Yes.
Director Fraga? Director Higgins?
Aye.
Director Hobson?
Yes.
Director Pang?
Yes.
Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Fuentes?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Item 3A is a presentation of the 2016 peer performance reports. Jill?
Good morning again. I'm going to turn this over to Karen Allen to deliver the performance measure reports from 2016.
Good morning. I'm not sure this is on. Is this on? Okay. Good morning, Director, Chairman. I'm here, and all directors. I'm here to present peer performance measure reports for 2016. The peer reviews contain data from FTA's National Transit Database, or NTD, and show how our region's operators perform in relation to their peers. As always, there is some lag time for the FTA to review, finalize, and publish data. So the data being presented within these reports were published this past October and reflect 2016's report year. This is the 10th time we're presenting the regional peer review, which covers the top 10 largest metropolitan regions in the U.S., with Chicago being the third most populous region. This report pools together data from the main transit operators for each region. So for the Chicago region, we've aggregated data for CTA, Metro, and PACE, but in all, there were 42 agencies represented within the report. The sub-regional peer review is being presented for the 8th time. This report examines performance for each mode separately. So we have urban and suburban bus, heavy rail and commuter rail, van pool, and ADA paratransit. For this report, we've chosen five appropriate peers to compare against the Chicago operator for each mode. Both reports use 4 categories to evaluate performance. Coverage describes how much service we provide to customers and how much is actually used. Efficiency and effectiveness evaluates the level of resources spent to deliver and use of the service. Maintenance and capital investment refers to the allocation of capital funds to replace and maintain infrastructure components. And solvency refers to the financial condition and the ability to meet operational and capital needs. Within the regional peer review, we use a 1 to 10 ranking system, with 1 being the most favorable position for having the best performance for a particular metric. In a nutshell, what we see with the regional peer review is that the Chicago region had strong performance overall. We ranked in the top half for 14 of 16 measures and in the top 3 for 7. Chicago did not rank in the bottom 3 for any of the measures contained within the report. We saw 6 rank position changes in 2016, improvement for 4 measures, and 2 rank position declines. I'll point those out as I go through the presentation. This and the next 3 slides are a series of charts for each of those 4 performance service areas. These charts provide the rank performance from 1 to 10 for each measure, again with 1 being the most favorable position and 10 being the least favorable. Chicago's performance is highlighted by an orange box you can easily pick out where Chicago ranks in relation to its peers. As you can see, New York ranked highest for each measure of service coverage. Here you can see strong performance for the Chicago region relative to its peers in the service coverage category, with each result being in the top half. For each of the 6 measures shown here, Chicago's ranking had remained unchanged from 2011 through 2015, but in 2016, Chicago moved up 1 rank position to 2nd for the annual number of passenger trips taken, or ridership. This happened even though Chicago's ridership decreased by over 3% in 2016, as Los Angeles saw a ridership decline of 7.6%. 7 of the regions, including Chicago, had ridership declines in 2016 with an average loss of 2.4%. And I did want to add that I do have some preliminary data for 2017, and that shows that we maintain that second place ranking for 2017 as well. Next category is service efficiency and effectiveness, where again we see some strong performance for the Chicago region. Most notably, Chicago retained its first place position for operating cost per passenger mile for the 6th consecutive year. An operating cost of 64 cents per passenger mile is 3 cents higher than 2015, but 24% less than the peer average. This metric is favorably impacted by operating cost containment, as well as the fact that our passengers have the longest average trip lengths. The third category of service is maintenance and capital investment. There was one rank change for the Chicago region, as shown by the arrow. The first measure is for the percent of vehicles beyond the FTA recommended minimum useful life, which for rail cars is 25 years, 12 years for buses, and 4 years for cars or vans. Collectively, this was the youngest fleet we've had in over a decade, which is significant progress toward our goal of state of good repair. That doesn't necessarily get reflected in our peer rankings, since other regions have also made fleet investments. The Chicago region did see downward movement in 2016 for the reliability measure, miles between major mechanical failures, dropping from 1st to 4th position. I'll talk more about that within the sub-regional peer section. The final slide for the regional peer review shows service level solvency, the service area in which we saw 2 measures go up in rank position and 1 measure go down in rank position in 2016. Again, the Chicago region performed somewhat favorably in comparison to its peers. What's notable here is that the Chicago region ranked 4th for total capital expenditures, with a striking difference. The Chicago capital expenditure of $712 million was 30% below the peer average of just over $1 billion, with New York outspending second place Los Angeles by more than double, or nearly 5 times what we spent in Chicago. When we look at capital expenditures on a per resident basis, we can see that Chicago lost 1 ranked position in 2016, moving from 5th to 6th place. We were displaced by Philadelphia, which increased capital spending by $10 per resident, where Chicago spent $7 less per resident compared to 2015. The peer average capital expenditure per resident was $97 versus Chicago's spending of $75 per resident. Now we'll move on to the second report, the sub-regional peer review. The sub-regional report focuses on each mode separately in comparison to 5 peer agencies. So we've got bus, suburban and urban bus, heavy rail and commuter rail, van pool, and demand response, or ADA paratransit. The reason we do these narrowed focuses is because there are no industry standards for these performance measures. So comparison to a set of similar peers helps us to establish benchmarks for performance. The sub-regional report allows us to see the strengths and weaknesses for each particular mode and to see unique characteristics or circumstances that may constrain performance or point to potential areas for improvement. So for example, these pictures illustrate a couple unique characteristics of Chicago Transit. One is that Metro operates in a very complicated environment where they have to share track with freight. CTA also has a unique operating environment in that it has to navigate very tight curves in the Loop L, the elevated loop tracks. So this forces CTA to use much smaller cars than its peers, which have up to 2.5 times larger capacity and allows them to have increased service effectiveness. PACE also stands out as having a large geographic region, which is more than triple the size of its next largest peer. So these are things to keep in mind as we look at the relative peer performance within the sub-regional peer review. Because even though our rankings may be worse in some cases, they may not necessarily be things within our control to change. In some cases, our performance is better year over year, but we might not see those changes reflected either in the peer rank positions, as I pointed out earlier with the state of good repair measure. We've done our best to find the most comparable peers, but keep in mind there is no perfect comparison to be made. This and the next 5 slides show a summary for each mode of service. The chart shows whether the Chicago operator met or exceeded the peer average, and it's shown by a check mark, as well as the Chicago operator's 2016 rank position. I'll point out some performance highlights and challenges for each mode. This slide shows CTA bus performance compared to its peers located in Boston, Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. As you can see by all the check marks, CTA bus continues to be a strong performer and ranked first or second for 5 of 11 measures. CTA bus's strength is that it has kept the top ranking for operating costs per vehicle hour for 8 years in a row, and the top fare recovery ratio for 7 years in a row. One challenge CTA faces is focusing on is with reliability, as shown by the measure miles between major mechanical failures. For the 2015 report year, Chicago, CTA had ranked third for this measure, but this dropped to sixth place in 2016. This was a point of discussion at our Performance Measurement Task Force meeting in January, and our CTA members stated they'd be looking into this area further to see if this is a reporting anomaly or if there's something else at work here that negatively impacted the results for 2016. Next chart shows performance for CTA Rail and its peer agencies in Atlanta, Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. CTA Rail outperformed its peers for 5 of 11 measures. CTA Rail's strength is shown by its top ranking for 2 service efficiency and effectiveness measures, the operating cost per vehicle hour for the 8th consecutive year, and operating cost per passenger mile for the 6th consecutive year. It also ranked first for having the youngest rail fleet for 3 years running, which is quite an achievement because it had ranked as the oldest fleet as recently as 2012. CTA had added over 650 rail cars into service from 2012 to 2016 to achieve that performance. CTA Rail also ranked first for the reliability measure miles between major mechanical failures. So as you can see, there are no check marks in the solvency area. These challenges are being addressed with the recent implementation of the fare increase that took effect in January 2018. This slide focuses on commuter rail. Metro has peers located in Boston, Philadelphia, and 3 that serve the New York region. Metro met or beat its peer average in 5 of 11 measures, including ranking first or second for both measures of coverage and all 3 measures of efficiency and effectiveness. One challenge for Metro has been related to fares. Metro is ranked low for each fare-related measure, with an average fare that's 25% below its peer average. To address this challenge, Metro has implemented a series of fare increases and also recently began a fare structure study to examine a different mix of fares and pass types. Pace suburban bus peers are located in Detroit, New York, Los Angeles, and 2 in the San Francisco area. As I stated earlier, we've been reporting on sub-regional peer performance for 8 years now, and for each of those years, Pace has held first place ranking for operating costs per vehicle revenue hour, which is a measure of cost efficiency that reflects the cost to provide service. Pace has ranked second for operating costs per passenger mile for each of the past 5 years. This is a measure of cost effectiveness that reflects actual use of the service. Pace was challenged with the 3rd year of declining ridership in 2016. But one thing to keep in mind is that Pace has implemented some streamlining of services so that riders have to make fewer transfers. So this is great for the rider experience, but it tends to negatively impact our ridership trends because there are fewer boardings being reported. Here we can take a look at Pace van pool results. Pace's peers are located in Dallas, Houston, Seattle, and 2 in Los Angeles. Pace van pool performs better than its peers for 2 measures of service efficiency and effectiveness, the operating cost per vehicle revenue hour and operating cost per passenger trip. The Pace van pool program is challenged by declining ridership. It's actually about 15% lower over the past 5 years. It's not likely that Uber or other ride-sharing services are a factor for the van pool mode since their trips tend to be very long. But the increasing prevalence of telecommuting and a shift away from traditional Monday through Friday work schedules has been noted within our customer satisfaction survey. This may impact riders' decisions to purchase a monthly van pool pass, which is the current only way to purchase this type of service now. To meet this growing challenge, Pace is considering a more flexible fare structure or billing options to better meet rider needs. The last mode we cover is ADA paratransit. Pace peers are located in Baltimore, Boston, New York, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. ADA paratransit service in the Chicago region continues to rank well among its peers, meeting or beating the peer average for 9 of 10 measures. ADA shows strong overall performance, has a young fleet, and a strong fare recovery ratio. ADA's biggest challenge has been in the reliability area, as shown by miles between major mechanical failures, for which it ranked 5th for 6 years in a row, but actually moved up to 4th position in 2016. To sum up regional performance, Chicago agencies performed quite well in comparison to their peers. Our service boards showed particularly strong performance in the measures of service efficiency and effectiveness. Inadequate and inconsistent capital funding continues to present the biggest challenge as shown in the chart here and mentioned earlier. Although Chicago is the third most populous region and has the second largest transit system in terms of passenger miles traveled and now in terms of ridership, we ranked 6th for capital expenditures per resident. This is one area of focus within the new strategic plan. We continue to work with the service boards to discuss and address their challenges through the Performance Measurement Task Force, as well as follow-up activities related to the strategic plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the two reports at this time.
Are there any questions from members of the committee or the board? Director McGallis?
Comment on the fare recovery ratio, which I've always been interested in, among other things, but it shows that as our region being 39.1%, with the disclaimer that the NTD formula that everybody else reports on is different than what we report on, because we use the RTA Act for that reporting.
Actually, for this report, we use the straight NTD definition.
So
For the peer
can
comparison.
you, I guess the question I had then is, can you show in the future what it is with our RTA information so that people know that?
Absolutely.
Because I think it's important, and I also wonder why we don't put that on our tickets. I guess that this ticket, this fare represents, I don't care if it's 39% or whatever it is, so that the rider knows that, you know, the total cost of the program is whatever that would make it be, depending upon the ticket they bought. And when we go out and survey them on the value of the ride and how we're doing, I think it would be beneficial for them to know that. And it would be a fairly easy thing to do if you took the average, or took this particular percentage and put it on the ticket and said, hey, we're paying 39, but that's not the cost of the service. So when you find that we need to raise the fares and we need to cut programs because we don't have the money, that's because this is only a small piece of it. And rather than doing it at the time when we have a disaster of having to cut budgets or raise fares, I just think it would really help make people more aware of what the true cost is. The second comment I guess I had was, and I think you did address it, and that was on the CTA. On the performance rating for aging fleet, it shows that we're doing much better now, so we've moved way up the ranks, but at the same time, our maintenance from our mechanical failures has gone way up. So we went down in that rating, if I understood what it said. Is that because of the new buses that, are they having problems with the new bus equipment that we've been buying?
This is what CTA needs to get back to us on. So I don't get very granular data. I have an overall number of the number of failures and the number of miles that feeds into that metric. So my best guess would be there may be some type of, I don't think it was any kind of weather-related incident that we saw in 2016. But maybe there's some kind of failure for a certain age of bus that needs to be addressed.
I think we should know that. I can't believe from
Yeah.
2016 till we're sitting here in April of 2018 that we don't know what's going on with that particular problem. Because the CTA, one thing that they've always been great at is maintaining the equipment, the old equipment they had. They had few failures and were rated really high on their ability to keep it running. Now we see that we've addressed the aging equipment, but yet their mechanical problems they're having to deal with seem to be out of whack with that. So I would like to know at the next
They were
meeting
going to be getting back to me on that
why
particular
that is.
item.
if possible.
Karen, excuse me, I think that only changed for the bus, right? It didn't change for rail. I think there are miles between mechanical failures with rail.
Right, it was just
stayed-
bus.
So that kind of answers your question a little bit,
What's
because
that?
it only changed on the bus
Right.
mode, not on the rail. The
No.
rail, they continue, I mean, that is one of the things we've taken a lot of pride in, that they keep old stuff running well, and so.
My comments were
yeah.
specifically addressing the bus service, because that's what the rating was that I was looking at in the document. I don't remember if it was in the, which one of the documents, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Dillard?
Yeah, I would clearly go back to the CTA and just tell them, at the RTA board meeting, there were concerns and, to stay on trying to find whether it was just a blip this particular year or whether there really is a problem that's out there. I think Director McGallis's suggestion on trying to put a percentage on Metra's tickets to say this is what you really pay, or this is what you, the rider, are contributing is a great idea. If there's a way to do that and to disseminate that information. I had a discussion with CEO of a company who bragged to me that he paid his $5.50 and rode the train downtown for a meeting. And I told him, that's just a fraction. Thank you very much for riding. We appreciate it. But, we're subsidized, or you're being subsidized as a rider through sales taxes and other means. And he was like astonished that it was not the full cost of the ride. And I said, if you drove, it would be at least $50 to drive downtown after you pay your $40 parking bill. But he was, this is a very, very sophisticated CEO, and had no clue that his $5.50 fare only paid a portion of what it cost to actually bring him to the city, and it would be very helpful. The other thing is, when I look at where Metra rates, and I had dinner the other night with Jim Derwinski and Chairman Carlson, the more we can get out there where Metra is vis-a-vis their peers on fares, the better. But Director McGallis' suggestion that we try to better inform our riders as to what they're actually covering, I think that's an excellent idea if we can figure out how to logistically make that work.
Director Colson?
Yeah, related to that, on the pure ratings, fare revenue per passenger mile, we were rated 6th, which I think is last. Why don't we just reformulate that standard and call it lowest fare or best bargain, and then we'd be number one.
Number one, sure.
Great idea.
I have one question. Who defines what a major mechanical failure is?
FTA. So it's any trip that's not taken, it's prevented due to some kind of mechanical failure. So it could be some kind of breakdown, the engine could break down, or it could be something like the fare box stops working, and then they can't continue on to provide that service. So there's a wide range of things, but it's anything that prevents the trip from being completed.
So it's not necessarily major in terms of the actual
Right.
piece of equipment?
It's major in terms of a service disruption.
Okay. Director Higgins?
Thank you. I just want to echo, I thought Director McGallis's idea about displaying the value somewhere is extraordinary. But I also had a question. Are there, aside from the service maintenance categories, are there other readily discernible measures of safety that we could compare? I know anecdotally we hear that we do very well on safety and whatnot, but anything along those lines that we could include? Or
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, this year we're doing, taking a fresh look at what measures are included in the reports. So if there are measures that we may want to have come out of the reports or add into the reports, we're going to be taking a look at that this year with our task force.
thank you.
Director Hapson?
Yes, I'd like to jump on the bandwagon and say what an excellent idea I think that is. But I would like to see it extended beyond Metra to also to be on PACE and CTA. And then further, I'd like to say, instead of being a percent, because we all know math is hard, I would like to suggest that we put the actual dollar value of what this ticket really costs. So thank you, Director.
Director Lewis?
Just a question for clarification, Karen. On the comparisons, I saw New York almost as the gold standard on the majority of the measures. Is there some secret sauce that we might learn from in terms of what they're doing there? Because on almost all the comparisons, or maybe there's something that we should understand that they're doing that we're not doing. I'd just be interested in any enlightenment you might provide.
Okay. Well, they've got a huge population. They've got a great density of people in a very small place. They have got a lot of service. Some would argue redundant service. And the price of parking is extraordinarily high. Jill, would you add anything
Yeah,
else?
just to jump in there, I mean, their system is just so much larger
Yeah.
than anyone else's, so you have that. But they also have a number of challenges right now, if anybody's following that. They're still underfunded. They have the same problems that we have about state of good repair and maintaining and everything else. So when we look at peers, they're head and shoulders above everybody just because of the size and the value of their system. But they are kind of in the same condition as we are in terms of trying to get funding.
Did I submit that that's somewhat misleading, because you might look at that and say, oh, New York seems like it's great and we're doing poorly relative to them. So if there's, maybe in the same spirit as the chairman, if there's a way for us to make it be more relevant so that the reader is educated as opposed to, I'm not saying intentionally misled, but misdirected.
Absolutely. As Karen mentioned, we're looking at kind of all of our measures again this year, and we're going to evaluate that. I think this is a great communication device, but it only goes so far. So I think if we were delivering this in front of a New York board, they would have those comments like, we look great, but we have all these issues. So how we can wrap that up. So we'll be working on that.
Chairman Dillard?
I never ever disparage, because we're all in this together with our peers in Philadelphia and Washington and New York. But I read a number of New York publications, and their system has real issues, especially in reliability. I've called Dorval Carter a couple of times on New York, and Dorval always comes to the defense of New York, saying they're so congested that they have real problems, and if somebody becomes ill on one of the trains, when they're carrying so many people, it backs up the lines, and they have immense reliability problems. I just heard the head of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District speak this week in Chicago, and I don't know if you read, but their subway system was leaking. They had a line short out this week, and they have, just if you read, any of the New York publications, just immense issues going on with their system. Governor Cuomo, I read in the Wall Street Journal, just came to their defense and came up with extra money just to sort of Band-Aid the system for a while in New York. If you remember, Boston shut their system down last winter. Can you imagine us just shutting the system down and saying, hey, for a month we'll just shut it all down because we have a tough winter? And Washington, D.C., when your Director Higgins getting to safety issues, they've had real problems, including deaths. They, last year, in the middle of a day, just shut the system down. I watch what happens very carefully, but you're right, those statistics. But the one I do use on New York is they have a much greater effort, as does Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Boston, and D.C., a much greater effort per capita than we do when it comes to capital expenditures. I always joke I would love to have Los Angeles's money. And as Director Redden pointed out multiple times, and it's in our strategic plan, almost all of the referendums nationally on mass transit issues, Los Angeles just did a sales tax increase. They pass overwhelmingly when you put them to the voters. And we have some big issues, including the fact nobody can believe that we haven't had a capital or infrastructure spending bill in a decade in Illinois. It's unbelievable. We have not spent money and had an infrastructure bill in a decade, and we're supposed to be the transportation hub of America. So, I always take these statistics with a grain of salt, but to me the bottom line is always, what is the cost per mile to operate our system? And we are continually, year after year, generally the most efficient in terms of operating cost per mile, because I think that, along with safety, is the most important statistic that we have. But we are in dire need of capital funding, and when Washington ever gets its act together, if they do and pass a Trump administration infrastructure bill, we've got to have the matching money, and Indiana and Iowa have been well positioned to be right there, and they kid me about it when I go to different national forums, that we're going to take all your Illinois tax money and we're going to put it in Indianapolis, or we're going to put it in Milwaukee, or we're going to put it in Des Moines. And to me, that's political and government malfeasance to leave that money on the table, since they're Illinois taxpayer dollars that get sent to Washington.
Director McGallis.
One more question. On the CTA always seemed to me to be at a disadvantage when you were making
Microphone, please.
rail comparisons. I'm talking rail for CTA, not bus. They're restricted by the number of riders per car, which greatly, I think, skews the numbers from like New York, who has more riders, many more riders on a car. So I guess when you look at the cost per mile to operate for the city and versus revenues and so forth, did we take that into any kind of consideration, or does the federal government take that into consideration at all? Because I wasn't aware of that until years ago. It came up, and I thought, well, that is a problem. And they can't make the cars longer because they can't handle the curves, the turns, and so forth.
As they allocate funding, you mean, to the region?
As they compare CTA operational, all these check marks that we just went through on their achievements of comparing their cost per mile and ridership and other comparisons.
As far as I know, there are at least 10 factors that the FTA looks at before they distribute the funds. So ridership would be one.
Not so
annual
much on
miles
the
of
funding. I
service.
think he's just asking on this data. So no, they don't. It's just
Oh,
a
it's just a
standardized
straight-
measure.
yeah.
So that's why we try to caveat this as much as possible. But there's challenges everywhere, and that's one that's
Because that's a
specific
big
to
one that the
us.
CTA is
Yep.
faced with. They can't do anything about it, and yet they could haul 20 more people if they could have a bigger car on the
Right.
tracks, but they can't. And yet they're compared to other transit systems that have that capability. So it just
Right.
seems like a kind of unfair comparison potentially for that.
Yep.
And I also want to get back to Director Hobson's. I think if on the idea of trying to show the rider what their cost is, if you could do it by dollar, that would be great instead of a percentage. And my thought on it was to do everybody, not just Metro. So, but I think the dollar would be great if they could do that.
Yep,
Thank
that's
you.
a very good point, and I think B&I will work with them to communicate that.
Chairman
Just
Dillard.
one point to piggyback on Ike's comment for some of the newer directors, and this is a compliment to our congressional delegation. We used to have generally only 6-car trains on the L's, and through some very innovative leadership of Senator Durbin and others in Washington, we are now able to run longer trains because they got money to expand our platforms, which helps because we are limited by the size of our physical cars. But without having our congressional delegation very innovatively figure out how we can run longer trains, those numbers would look different. So, I sit here and sometimes grouse on these folks, but I just want to give my hats off to our congressional delegation and the CTA, who came up with the idea of, hey, let's find federal funding to extend the length of our platforms so we can run longer trains, which make these numbers a little better. But you are right, the smaller cars are, all you have to do is look outside our right outside of our window and see one of the great examples of how difficult it is to make a turn in what is traditionally the loop.
Are there any other questions or comments? If not, Karen and Joe, thank you very much for a very good report. Obviously, the board was engaged. Item 4A, ordinances authorizing contracts for enterprise resource planning, software implementation, and related services. Mark Miner?
Point it towards your mouth.
Thank you again, directors, for your attention today. Staff is requesting that this committee recommend board adoption or committee adoption of 3 ordinances allowing the executive director to enter into contracts for the purchase of period of 5 years. The procurement of the new ERP software and services is just one piece of the RTA's ERP initiative. As discussed in January of this year before the board, the ERP initiative began with a review of RTA's business processes and technologies. That analysis concluded that the RTA would benefit from the implementation of a modern, cloud-based ERP that better integrates our business processes and data. We then collected requirements from across the agency to determine what functionality we would need in a new ERP. With board approval today, we will have wrapped up the procurement phase, the middle blue box, which began last summer, and we anticipate that the rest of 2018 will be spent designing, configuring, migrating, and testing the new system with the expectation that the ERP will go live in 2019. As a reminder, the ERP initiative aims to achieve the strategic business objectives listed before you. Increasing productivity through optimized business processes and automation. Give you some examples of where we see opportunities in that in a little bit. Enhancing our access to data through a single integrated database and application with strong analytics and reporting tools, as opposed to our current system of about a dozen software solutions that aren't really integrated to one another, that we don't have a lot of transparency and visibility into. So that is a huge business objective we want to achieve. And another one is lowering our operational risk. Migrating to a cloud-based solution with strong reliability, disaster recovery capabilities, where we offload the responsibility of maintenance from our internal IT staff to a vendor that is best in class and that uses a world-renowned data centers, things along those lines that we'll be able to achieve as a huge business objective for us as well. And strengthening our controls. We'll be doing this through use of role-based access and single sign-on authentication, as opposed to our current system where, as I think many of my colleagues can attest, we have multiple usernames, multiple passwords that at least I'm often forgetting which one's used for which. So it's definitely one area we want to improve upon. The ordinance before this committee are a result of a lengthy and comprehensive procurement process. We received 8 proposals and held 2-day product demonstrations for each of the 5 short-listed proposals. The preferred solutions were selected in late 2017, and we have spent 2018 to date negotiating with preferred vendors. So the solution we are recommending that be purchased was proposed by Infor. Infor is a world-renowned, best-in-class ERP, both cloud and on-premise provider as well as integrator. This solution is centered on the Infor Cloud Suite Public Sector ERP as the core software for managing our financials, procurement, human resources, and budgeting processes, as well as monitoring the agency's overall performance through other analytics. Integrated with the Infor Cloud Suite will be the Simpro Treasury Management software that will help the RTA generate, that will be used to manage our investments, debt, and cash, while the MHC software is a background software that will help the RTA generate and disseminate documents such as purchase orders, invoices, and employee tax documents such as W-2s, 1095-Cs, and payroll checks. The new ERP will be used to conduct work in the functional areas listed on the screen. We will replace nearly a dozen standalone legacy systems, including some that are beyond their useful life or are unsupported. There's a huge risk to the agency today. Additionally, the new ERP will reduce the use of shadow software such as Excel, Access, and other database technologies that we use to manage, to process our business in these functional areas. Often they're not, very few of them are integrated with one another, so there's a lot of data duplication, a lot of manual reconciliation that goes on that is just inefficient, and we can improve on our productivity in those areas. The Infor solution will handle over 90 business processes, integrate with the RTA's banks, benefit providers, and other partners. We'll provide portals for suppliers and vendors to bid on RTA procurements and submit their invoices, and feature a self-service HR portal for RTA employees to manage our personnel information. The integrated in-force solution will benefit the RTA in many ways. Some of them are listed on the screen here, and I'll give some examples. Streamlining our business processes. Currently, I recently transferred to the IT department, and this is how our process in HR works in our organization for me to move. HR prints out my pieces of my personnel record. They cross it out. They write the new department name on it. They scan it. They put it in a share drive. Email our accounting folks and payroll folks. Let them know that that document is in there. They go in, hand enter it into our payroll system, and it goes to other places. And every system is updated manually. And that simple change of moving from the planning department to our finance and IT department probably required 3 or 4 people to hand enter information or print out and scratch out information on paper. The new ERP, it's all going to be integrated. HR can go in, whoever's responsible for that data point, make that change. It infiltrates and integrates into all the other areas of the organization. Another business process we talk about is our month-end financial reconciliations. Right now, we deal with paper statements or PDF statements from our bank that come in, and we have to match the transactions in the bank accounts. The new ERP will have a direct integration with our banks. Data will come in through a BAI file, and it will automatically reconcile most of the transactions within the system. Where it sees, let's say, an open payable in our financial system for $20,000 to Company X, if our bank says Company X deposited a check for $20,000 or this check cleared, it matches it. We don't have to manually reconcile that. All these things will save significant time on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis for how we do our business. As I mentioned, we're reducing our manual reconciliations and our reconciliations between systems. We have an HR system and a payroll system in our financial systems. They all have HR, personal information in those systems for all of our employees. We have found in the past it is not consistent. As one change is made, it doesn't always get made into every system. So all these things that can introduce risk. Some of it's quantifiable, some of it's more qualitative risk, and some of it, it's just risk that we have integrated into our business processes that we feel we can greatly reduce as we implement ERP. Faster transaction processing and approval. Right now, to get a contract, when a contract needs to be signed off on, it's put in a folder called the red folder, and it's moved from our procurement department to the using department to our legal department, back to purchasing to collect the signatures. This can all be done electronically through a new ERP. So we're not hunting, chasing red folders or purple folders or other type of folders that are going around the organization. Enhanced reporting. Right now, if most people need a report, they generally go to 1 or 2 people within the organization and say, hey, I need a report run. These new systems this new system has dashboards, inquiry screens, easy-to-use reporting tools that will just create such efficiency within the organization that is definitely a worthwhile investment, in my opinion. Connecting our data and documents. Right now, we have a financial. So if you want to see an invoice, you have to go into one system, find out the invoice number, then go to another system, and then you got to search through a folder to find the actual PDF of that invoice. Your contracts, if you want to see a contract, you go into the financial system, you can find a little bit of information about the contract, but if you want to see the contract, you have to go to a separate system, hunt and peck, find the PDF of your contract and open it up. The new system, you search for you can search on the vendor name, the contract number, anything, and just with a couple of clicks of the mouse, you'll be pulling up the documents that you need. Everything can be attached within the in-force system. Improving our system performance and reliability. Right now, our financial system is housed in our data center on this floor. It's a single data center. It works for us. What we are moving to is the cloud, which has a huge number of benefits. We'll be hosted through AWS. We'll be hosted within America. We'll have both a primary site, a completely separate secondary site, replication. So if one goes down, we are able to move right to the other one without skipping a beat almost. Regular software upgrades. Beauty of the cloud, software updates are seamless to us for the most part. The vendor will be responsible for, as they put new updates on their software, they'll work with us, we'll test them, they'll install them. We have none of that responsibility outside of testing it to make sure it works. We do not, our IT staff will not be touching the software upgrade, pushing updates, doing all those things that introduce risk, take time, cost money. So these benefits, along with many others, will help us achieve the strategic business objectives mentioned earlier. We believe that by implementing the ERP system, and I think this is really one of the big cruxes and big benefits of the system, we spend a lot of time processing transactions here at the RTA and reconciling transactions. We want to spend less time processing and reconciling transactions and more time analyzing the data that comes out of those transactions and finding ways to improve the RTA operations as an agency, as well as improving the region's transit system. We want to spend that time, I think, all the things that we've talked about at this meeting today, peer performance, where we as an RTA, as an agency, can bring value to the transit system, the less time we're spending processing invoices, submitting purchase requisitions, doing all the mundane, necessary tasks, the less time we're spending doing those, the more time we can spend to really being a value add to the CTA, Metro, PACE, and the region as a whole. So additionally, we have identified multiple existing business processes where data exchanges between the RTA and the service boards can be enhanced and updated through the new ERP. The Infor ERP allows various potential integration options. We could give the service boards direct entry, have the service boards directly enter information into the Infor system, obviously with the right proper security. We could create automated interfaces between the RTA and service board systems. We could use spreadsheet uploads. We could create templates out of our ERP, send the templates, they can fill them out and upload the information rather seamlessly, and it'll greatly improve the PDFs that we get today from the service boards and have to manually enter and hope we don't make any keystroke errors. So we are working internally and with the service boards to determine the most effective and efficient ways to pass the data between the agencies for each of these business processes. So we don't have the final answer on how we're going to do it, but we know that we have a variety of options. So we're really going to work hard with them as we get into the implementation and figure out what works best for us, what's for them, what we can do in the system, and how we can do it. The implementation of the Infor ERP solution is expected to take approximately 16 months, with the project split into 6 phases. Phase 0 focuses on project initiation and planning, including the development of a change management plan. Since the implementation of the Infor system will result in significant technological and procedural changes, we want to make sure that this transition is seen as a positive change for RTA employees, for our service board partners, for vendors, and others who will interact with the new system. And I want to highlight the vendors because that process of them seeing our bids, seeing our solicitations on the street, submitting their bids, managing their contracts through the system, that's all possible, and that's all what's been included in the Infor proposal. So there's benefits there that are not going to be necessarily only seen by the RTA, but also by our vendors and their interactions with us, and the ability to hopefully speed up our procurement processes, contract negotiations, and just have a better contract management relationship with our vendors. Phases 1 through 5 focus on the implementation of individual software modules that make up the integrated ERP system. These phases include the configuration of the software, development of integration of data, testing of the system, as well as training staff. Obviously, training our staff is very important, and as well as creating training materials for those partners that will interact with our system. Each phase will be considered complete when the modules are in production and any initial operational issues have been resolved. So as you can see, the plan is to have all modules live by summer 2019. So the total authorization we are requesting today for implementation and maintenance of the ERP through 2023 is $5.9 million. This amount includes a small 3% contingency that will be available solely at the RTA's discretion, and the allocation of the total amount requested by for these 3 contracts is shown on the screen. What I will say is these contracts are fixed price contracts. So that is another way we are reducing and sharing risk here. We have a fixed scope, we have a fixed price, we have cost certainty. We have cost predictability for the full 5 years of these agreements. So if we need maintenance on this, if the system breaks and there needs to be maintenance, vendor's responsibility at their cost. We have a technical support question, all included, unlimited technical support. We can go to them, ask the question, no additional cost to us. So, we have the right number of licenses, we have the right functionality. The implementation is a fixed price, so if the vendor has an issue during implementation, that is their responsibility or their fault. They need to continue to do the work and fix the issue at no additional cost to the RTA. So it's a really fixed price, cost certain contracts that we're asking for today. And that not just from a contract perspective, but from a budget perspective and operations. We know what we will spend on our ERP for the next 5 years. So when we get to annual budget appropriations, there's no risk. There's really no risk in our budget request. So what do we get for these contracts? Infor Public Sector, Inc., they're really responsible for software license subscriptions, project management, implementation services, organizational change management, training, hosting, and technical support. Emphasis Software and MHC Software, they'll be responsible for providing software licenses and subscription services, implementation services, as well as maintenance and technical support throughout the life of the contracts. I do want to point out the Infor contract includes one 5-year option. That is not included, the exercise of that option is not included in this pricing, but we do have the option, and we obviously would come back to the board when we want to exercise, if and when we want to exercise that option, and we'll come back with the pricing at that point. It's just hard to price out 10 years of software licensing. The DBE goal established for this procurement is 7%. Infor has submitted a DBE compliance plan that meets the DBE goal using local DBE firms, including Next Generation Inc. and Ernest R. Sawyer Enterprises. And I also want to point out that Ernest R. Sawyer Enterprises is also certified as a veteran-owned business by the city of Chicago. So the implementation of a new ERP is really a transformative project that will have significant impact on the RTA as an agency and its employees. The project management team has spent a substantial amount of time understanding the work that each RTA staff member does and how up-to-date technology can help them become more efficient and productive. Throughout the organization, there is a true excitement about the benefits that a new ERP will bring, and the project team is ready to hit the ground running on implementing the Infor solution. I want to thank all the business unit leads, subject matter experts, system users, and other employees who have participated in the ERP initiative to date. And I want to extend a special thanks to Nadine and her team for their hard work in managing this procurement and negotiating the contracts before the committee today. As we implement the new ERP, we will keep the committee and the rest of the board apprised of our progress, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Director Colson?
Yeah, that was a very good presentation, and I thank you. And we talked about this before the meeting a little bit. My initial impression was that $5.9 million for a 110-person organization was a lot of money. And I go back, ground zero would be, in the old days, you'd probably hire 2 guys with eye shades, and they'd lock them in a room all day, and they would do all this manually. And that was certainly a lot slower, but it was certainly also a lot cheaper. I'm beginning to understand why Bill Gates is a gazillionaire. Those days are gone forever, obviously, but I would like some more context. I mean, can you quantify what you're saving here, or is this going to result in fewer personnel, or is there any way to quantify what we're getting for this huge expenditure of money?
So I want to point out, our current financial system is about 10 years old, or will be 10 years old by the time we would implement this new system. That system cost, we probably spent $2 to $3 million over the life of that software, and it only is on financials, right? So it doesn't do all our grants management, doesn't do our HR, doesn't do our treasury, doesn't do our payroll, doesn't do all these other systems. So we now have to spend additional money on an annual basis for systems that do that. We spend over $200,000 a year just in maintenance, support, software, some of the software licenses on those ancillary systems. We also have invested money in some of those ancillary systems through one-time software costs years ago. Some of those software are beyond 10 years that we've been using, basically those softwares for longer than 10 years, and those there's a lot of risk that's introduced there. So in terms of that, we do, there's there's kind of this upfront expense of implementing a new system, then there's the ongoing. So in this case, we're looking at about 2/3 of the cost is to get the new system implemented. And then over the time, what we expect to spend is about $400,000 a year. So more than we do today, but we're getting a lot more. And to me, it's a worthwhile investment in the fact that we are going to gain that productivity. We will allow our personnel to repurpose their time to more value-added activities as opposed to processing and reconciling transactions. So there's no doubt in my mind that our benefits will exceed the costs, and that's not even bringing the risk. And risk comes with, it's unknown, but there's a huge cost to if something were to happen to one of our systems or multiple of our systems, and it were to we wouldn't only have to repair what happened, but what have we lost during that intervening period in terms of productivity and work. So our goal is to free people up. So not to cut staff and reduce headcount. That's not the goal. The goal is to free up the people's time so they can be more value add to the region and to the transit system.
Okay, but you can't really quantify. Maybe it's unquantifiable, the money saved.
Some of the issue, to that point, some of the issue is our systems today don't provide us the transparency and visibility that necessarily clearly allow us to see what we spend today on processing those transactions. A lot of it is anecdotal. We know that we have people here who spend, more than, a significant portion of their time doing that reconciliation, the transaction. So, some of it is anecdotal and more qualitative than necessarily quantifiable.
Other questions? Director Payne?
Have you gone through the exercises to do process redesign in each of the functions? And did that not result in some quantifiable efficiencies?
So we did go through, as you see, it started in fall of 2016. We did a process, and we had brought in Plant Moran. If you guys remember, Plant Moran, they came in, they walked through over 100 business processes with us, documented what we currently do today, developed a future state, proposed future state that added efficiencies in it, also looked at how a modern ERP would interact with those business processes. We did not do a quantitative analysis on, the cost per, or the cost of those efficiency improvements, partially because, as I mentioned, we just didn't have a whole lot of transparency and visibility in our current systems today to know what we spend and how long it takes to do those business transactions that we do today. So, but yeah, we did do process redesign, and now we are, we'll refine that process redesign as we implement the ERP.
However, sitting through these current and future state processes, you will see all of the steps eliminated. The staff knows how to do their job better than we will. And so they identified, well, if I didn't have to do this, if I didn't have to do that, I enter this into 3 different systems. I move this paper around. So the current compared to the future state clearly showed steps being eliminated and processes being streamlined. But we have not quantified, to Mark's point, what the value of that is.
I think, we would want to see some examples at a minimum of how that frees people up.
Sure. I mean, I think the one I talked about a little earlier in terms of the monthly close of our financial books. I mean, they're doing spreadsheets and paper statements and matching transactions that way. In this system, we can bring in the BAI file from the bank on a daily basis or a weekly basis and do the automated matches. And, at the end of the month where we have, hundreds of transactions, maybe there's 10 to 15 that didn't match that they don't have to go in and manually match. So what can take hours, if not days, can come down to minutes, if not an hour or so. I mean, I think that's just one area. I think some of the HR stuff where, as an employee, if I need to make a change in my personnel my personal information. I have to fill out a paper form, hand it to HR. They hand enter it into the system. Hopefully, don't make keystroke errors. Now we'll have a self-service portal. I go in, I make the change, it workflows it. They look at it, they say, okay, that's a legitimate change. They approve it. It's in the system. It has now gone to every other system. They've been able to push that change to our. If I move and change my address, we're going to build integration so that that information goes directly to all our benefit providers. So our 401k, our healthcare, our dental insurance, all those places where they were faxing, emailing, going into the provider system and hand entering it again. All that goes away. And so that's a change that would take them hours that has now gone down to minutes.
So
Director Hobson?
I'm not sure
sorry.
if you were. As I've watched these kinds of systems be put in all over different companies, I'm sitting here trying to remember a time when a major system was going to be put in that did not have a cost-benefit analysis. So very detailed identification of cost reduction, people reduction, very well laid out to justify a major expenditure for a system implementation. So I think just having anecdotal discussion about the benefits is insufficient to approve. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm saying we should really understand how we can get the maximum cost reduction out of implementing this.
So I understand your point. I think the issue is it's not an apples to apples comparison. We can certainly quantify some of the other systems being eliminated, right? We can do that. I mean, one of the things is, and as I understand it, it might be 10 years old, but it was actually implemented 2 years late. So it's like a 12-year-old system. Either way, it had to be replaced. The infrastructure investment, because clearly this is a cloud-based solution, so there would be infrastructure investment from an on-premise solution if that was to be continued. So there's certain things that are quantifiable. There are other things that I believe are not, because the staff, let me give you another example. If there are people processing concurrences from the service boards, right? So they're entering into one system, in this case, they're entering into two different places, and they're processing concurrent for reimbursement. Those people would be better spent analyzing the capital investments and analyzing those capital projects, or on the budget side, what their budget submissions are, rather than just sitting there posting things from one system to another. It's hard to quantify that, right? They're still needed, they still have to do that work, but I think there's value added, as Marcus pointed out, from doing more analysis. When we come before you for the budget period, right, you know how it's a difficult negotiation and what the funding levels are going to be. So what we end up doing is run numbers 10 different ways. So Doug will keep running manual spreadsheets based on what the latest funding agreements are. Those would now be automatically entered. That doesn't mean we don't need Doug to do the analysis on the monies that are involved. On the contrary, he would be able to spend his time more trying to do and look at what the budget submissions are, rather than just keep updating, whether we're giving someone, 33 million or 32 million, and keep running spreadsheets. So it's hard to quantify that exactly. But there are other things that we can quantify,
I'm not saying it's not hard.
It's not apples to apples is what I'm saying. Yeah.
I mean, my experience has been whatever that process is going to be after the system's implemented, you've thought that out. And to think that we're not going to have those things that those folks are doing, the other analysis, I'm assuming they're doing those now.
They're not able to do some of that because the time frame is the bench is just not there. So they're not able to do that. Today we don't even have 24/7 IT coverage. We have Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30.
But somehow you need to get this organized in a way where, if you have to take your best guess, you take your best guess, but at least lay out what the targets are going to be on the economic benefits of a major system implementation. And so somebody ought to think through, okay, so what resources are needed after this is done? What do you think is, we need to figure that out now, not on the fly once we put it in. I'm just saying that's been my experience. And then at least it holds all of us accountable to achieving the kind of results we want to achieve. Because now, I mean, you're going to put it in and you'll get whatever you get. You know, you need measures and accountability to achieve whatever it is that we want to achieve. So that's just been my experience. And so, I'm not saying it's not hard. I'm not, but without that, it's hard to justify major expenditures like that.
Director Abson?
Yeah, it's the magnitude of this expense that certainly concerns me. I'm one that's all for a new ERP system. I'm one that's all for automating and making people much more effective and using their talents in analysis rather than data entry. That all makes perfect sense to me. I have no doubt that this particular proposal would make people more efficient. None of that is in question in my mind. What I question is the $11,500 per employee per year for the next 5 years. Are we getting our bang for the buck, essentially an ROI that Director Anderson brought up? Are we getting that ROI? Are we better off doing something else? Are we better off sticking with what we do today? And I don't think that work has been done by staff at this point in time. I think innately we know that there is improvements, there is efficiencies to be gained, but we haven't been able to quantify that. And I'm hesitant to support this because we don't have that quantified. I personally would propose that we delay this a month, give staff ample opportunity to do an ROI evaluation, and then bring it back to the board.
I'd like to speak to a couple of points you made. As we discussed, the cost per employee is misleading. I'm not saying you didn't do the math right. You did the math right. But here is the situation. What's, I think, a little misleading is you look at an organization our size and you think, why do they need, the system? The thing is, we need all the same functionality that a large city would need. Okay, just because we're 110 employees doesn't mean we don't need a procurement function, an HR function, accounts payable, accounts receivable, budgeting, treasury. We need everything like the city of Chicago needs, okay? Everything that a CTA or a Metro would need, with the exception of the fares, because we don't obviously provide a service. So we need all the functionality. Where we save money is in the number of users, right, and the number of licenses. And even though we do want some of the service ports to also have licenses, we might be able to limit those to 4 or 5 or something like that, because there'll be people in the budget area, capital group, and things like that would need licenses. So you pay a cost per module or per functionality. So that is the same. Where we do benefit is from less users. So that would be the first point. The second point is we really need this project to start in May. Yes, we can adjust because, as I explained, it's very hard to have 2 ERP systems running in one fiscal year. And we were hoping to close our 2018 fiscal year by the first quarter in 2019. So that means we want to go live in April. By all accounts, through our vendor, as you can see, even the live dates, we'd like to get the financials up by April 1st of 2019, and then continue with some of the other stuff. The budget season starts in like June, and so we can do some of those other things. So that's why we were really hoping to get this approved at this meeting.
So that brings up 2 questions. One, do you not think an ROI should be done, an ROI analysis on any investment should be done?
No, of course I'm not going to say that. What I'm saying is that we know that through the mapping and through the future and the present state, we needed to replace our ERP system anyway. So that's not the issue. What I think we've done is really a lot of the due diligence to understand how we needed to be a more comprehensive solution, to not make some of the decisions that were made in the past based on the information they had at the time, that really limited the ability for this agency to conduct their business and created a lot of shadow systems and manual paper processes to fill those gaps. So we think we've done that. I think, certainly we can quantify the systems and replacements and so forth, but it's not just difficult. It's not an apples to apples comparison to look at, like, we don't have a lot of this today. So it's hard to say, okay, well, we don't have this today. So of course, we're not comparing the same kind of functionality.
And further, I understand you would like, and it would be more convenient to have it all happen in April and get started, but on a $6 million decision, I'm not comfortable being rushed just because it would be more convenient.
Director McGallis?
I guess one of the things,
Microphone, please.
as Director Colson said, and also Director Hobson, I think the thing that's missing is a cost-benefit analysis of this. I mean, we hear a lot of it. It's going to save this, save that. Normally, something like that, you would anticipate it at least would offset having to hire additional people in certain areas. It may even result normally in reduction of staff. We have nothing presented that really did a cost-benefit analysis. I think you did a great job analyzing the benefit of the software for the agency and what it will do. But without the cost analysis, as one person who on the board, I'm not going to vote for it, because I think until we get that kind of information, how can we be asked to do that? And I'm sorry about the deadline of trying to convert, but if the information's not here, it's not here. And it also would be nice to have a commitment from the service boards as one of the benefits that they're going to use it also to save, data entry. It is a benefit to them. But I just think all that's missing. And hopefully we could get that sometime in the future.
Yeah. I have a couple of additional questions that you may not be able to answer here. The software upgrades, are they part of a fixed cost, or is that additional?
No, that's included. So software as a service. So as the vendor, as
Okay.
Infor were to roll out some upgrades to their software, they would come to us. They would load into a development environment, a testing environment. We would test it. As long as we're good with it, they would push it to production. That's all included in the annual license fee.
And then, have you done a security analysis of these three systems and how it compares to what's happening today in your processes managing these different critical functions?
When you say security analysis,
A data security analysis.
Yeah, I mean, we've done, through the contract negotiations, we requested obviously all the information about where they're hosting it. The Infor solution will be hosted on AWS. So that everybody, our standard is you need to obviously be SSAE 18 compliant, which is the standard now. SOC reports, we have the ability to get the SOC reports. Amazon posts their SOC reports online for the public, so we know our data is secure. We know that as we build the integrations, that's part of the analysis to go through and make sure that the data is secure. So we have all the confidence through our discussions with the vendors and the documentation they provided that all the data transmission will be secure and data storage will be secure.
Thank you.
Director Higgins?
A couple questions. The 2/3 of this cost that's implementation, are those entirely incurred in years 18 and 19, or what years is that 2/3 of implementation cost incurred?
Yeah, during the implementation, which is
Okay, so 18 and
assuming it starts shortly, we would incur all those costs in 18 and 19.
Okay. And were those costs reflected or built into the budget that we approved?
Yeah,
Yes.
all the upfront costs are budgeted, and obviously the annual cost will be done through the annual appropriations.
The budget that grew at less than the rate of inflation over prior year spending, which, again, I commend you and appreciate that.
So we, of course, have some reserves because we knew that the ERP system would be getting replaced, and we have been budgeting part of our budget, positive budget variance. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, and the second question is, this is a 5-year contract, which is very front-ended on implementation, as all these typically are. What options to renew, or do we have on the back end so we're not having to switch vendors have new implementation costs? What do we have there
Right.
contractually?
So the Infor contract has a single 5-year option that's worked into the contract, and then the smaller contracts, the emphasis in the MHC, those are basically maintenance agreements, license and maintenance agreements that either are perpetual licenses, so we own the software, and then the maintenance is just really an annual. We would come back to the board and say, hey, we would look to extend this for to match the Infor option if we were to exercise that option.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I have a third question now. So, Infor public sector, do we have a sense of some other clients or the viability of the company to continue over the course of the next 10 years if we exercise that option?
Sure. So as part of the RFP process, we had all the vendors submit financials, and our finance team and our legal team did review their financials, and they all came back positive in terms of the financial stability of the organizations.
They're also used extensively in government entities. We do have all that information. There were reference checks. There were reference checks by specific modules. We participated in those calls, so there was a lot of due diligence done, especially in some of our areas which, government entities have certain functionalities that may not be, private sector ones, like our grants management and so forth. So the evaluation team considered that, very extensively and did their due diligence on specific governmental kinds of activities to make sure that they would meet our requirements. Yes.
Thank you.
Are there other, I'm sorry, Director Hobson?
Chairman Ross, I'd like to make a motion that we table this item until next month to give staff an opportunity to do a ROI/cost-benefit analysis for all of our benefit.
And is there a second? I believe a motion to table takes precedent. Am I correct? Is there a second? Director, the motion to table. I think Director Fraga was doing it. Director Fraga?
I'm sorry. Yeah, Director Anderson, you're not on the committee to make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Should I do a roll call?
Let's do a roll call, please.
Director Durante? Aye. Director Fraga? Aye. Director Higgins? Aye. Director Hobson?
Yes.
Director Pang?
Yes.
Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Fuentes?
Aye.
7 ayes. So the item will be tabled.
Can I make one more comment, Dr.
Yes,
Rose?
please.
When you come back next month, can you talk about how the service boards have been exposed to this and what that interaction may be, or that integration even better?
Yeah, we can do our best. I think at this point, until we get into the implementation, we have options. But obviously, once we get a vendor on board and we can have more conversations with the vendor and the service boards, then we'll be able to really pin that down. So, we know there are options, but until we have it signed, sealed, it's a little.
But we
Perhaps
can
even conceptually.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah.
The points of integration, we can enhance, provide more information on that.
And as staff, do you feel that you have enough information about the questions now to move forward? Or do we need to have someone from this board serve as a liaison while you're doing the work?
I think we do, but I think what we can do is provide some additional information to the director through the chairman, and to make sure that we're on the right track before the meeting.
I have no problem with that, and I'll be in touch with you when that gets out.
Okay, with that, if there is no other business to come before the committee, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Director Durante?
Second.
And a second by Director Pang. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
morning, everyone. I will call the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority to order. And would Director Durante please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?